Hello there. We're here today because an election is coming. And with the election coming, I want to remind you of some history. And I have two soldiers here with me who's going to kick in to make sure that there's no excuse for nobody not understanding the significance of voting this year. On you, Ms. Norma.
Okay, so I am Norma Jackson. I currently serve as the president of the Macon County chapter of Alabama New South Coalition. And I'm just here to do just what Chief said, to encourage us to really think about how significant this 2020 election is.
Ms. Patton.
I'm Magdalene Patton, the secretary for the New South Coalition of Macon County. And I'm here, as previously said, to just encourage each of you how important it is to go out and vote.
Now, Ms. Patton, when you think about the history that has gone into this right to vote, what do you sense about where people's heads ought to be today, and what do you think about those times?
I sense that they should be running to the polls to vote. We need to at least show our appreciation for the ones that fought so hard to get the right for us to vote. And it's very important. You can't talk about what's going on if you don't get out and vote.
What about
When
that?
I think about the history, I hear people talk about all kind of excuses for why we don't vote. But when I think about the fact that if it weren't so important, they wouldn't work so hard to keep it from us.
What are you talking about?
They go to extraordinary measures to make sure that we don't exercise, don't have. First of all, they didn't want us to have it. When we got it, they started working on ways to take it back. And for the last few years, with the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, with the voter suppression, it is just, they go through astronomical lengths to keep us from voting. So we need to think about why that is.
And we just had a lesson from one of our sisters, young Jamil McDade, and she sent out the history of Tuskegee, all of the black people being gerrymandered out of the city, except a couple of families, so that people in Tuskegee couldn't even vote.
Absolutely. And that was a landmark case. Gamillion versus Lightfoot was a landmark case. And so we in this community, of all communities, ought to appreciate and understand the relevance and the significance of the vote.
Now, that kind of suffering on our people, it's hard to even imagine. Our people having to go through all of that, getting hung, getting killed, getting put off of their plantations and everything else, just for the notion of trying to encourage each other to vote. When you read about and when you think about that kind of suffering, what comes to your mind?
Well, first of all, it's angering. You
It
get
is.
angry to think about the fact that a human being would do that to another human being. That makes me angry. That's the first thing. But then the second thing is, like Ms. Patton alluded to, we have almost an obligation to not let that have been in vain. Our people were beaten. We all know we're coming up on the 55th anniversary of Bloody Sunday this weekend. We just have an obligation to at least honor the fact that people's blood was shed in order for us to have this right.
How does it impact you?
Well, I was going to say, recently I was watching the movie Selma, and I was looking at one lady that had to recite the preamble to the Constitution. Well, she recited it perfectly, and so then he said, well, name the commissioners. Well, who would have known back then who the commissioners were? Because this was back in the day when they didn't have any rights, practically. So he asked her, name the commissioners. So she was denied the right to register to vote.
And can you imagine the hurt that must have gone through her to be that prepared, that intelligent, and still be denied?
Denied the right to vote. So there's no reason we should not go out and vote. Now they're asking us that we have to have a star on our license. That's adding You know, every time they add a little layer and a little layer to try to prevent us from voting. So that shows us the importance of our vote.
And you know, when we talk about they, we're not talking about all white people. We're talking about those deplorable white people who are forever intent to make our futures nearly impossible, and definitely as hard as possible. But now I tell you, good white community, you bear a lot of the burdens because you know who they are. You know what they are doing, you know how they are doing it. So if you sit quietly by and allow these things to seemingly roll right back into, you know, the picture for the future, well then, I don't know how to separate they from the employed.
Because you are complicit. If you,
Yeah.
if you sit by and do nothing, you're complicit.
Right. Now, we know that the voting rights law was passed. And we know that a whole lot of struggle had to go into that.
Yes.
What do you imagine it meant to Mrs. Amelia Boynton Robinson and Dr. King and all of those people who walked all those miles and did all that suffering after, what my man names got him, so Jimmy Lee Jackson got murdered by a state trooper. What do you imagine their thoughts were about that achievement, to have a president sit down and woo a Congress into coming together to do a voters' rights law? What do you get out of that?
Wow. I think it was astronomical for them. It was a huge, huge accomplishment. One that they always had faith in. But to actually have it happen in their lifetime, I think it was probably almost miraculous for them. But they had worked extremely hard, and people had worked extremely hard before them. It's always an ongoing, you know, one generation benefits, hopefully, from the foundation laid by the one before it. And so to have actually witnessed that in their lifetime, I would imagine it was pretty powerful.
Can you imagine how they must have felt?
To get it done, they had to have a good feeling. And I know they were looking forward to it helping us, who are coming behind them. And now we are looking forward to the voting rights.
Still fighting.
Still
To
fighting.
help the ones that's coming behind us. So yes, we need to continue to fight. And it had to be a good feeling for them to know that they finally signed the right to vote. Therefore, we have no reason not to go out and vote.
You are absolutely right. Now, let's compare and contrast the benefits of all of that. Now, before Reconstruction, no blacks could vote. After slavery was abolished, most males, especially black men, were allowed to vote. Then people started getting elected to Congress and Senate. I have a picture of 7 black congressmen and senators, you know. And then all of a sudden, those deplorable woke up and declared that they had to stop that. And then they brought in not only Ku Klux Klan, but they brought in Jim Crow laws and everything else to roll that clock back. So when you think about before and after, what comes to your mind? Let me go with you first this time.
What comes to my mind for them to roll it back and see that what happened? Is that the
No,
question?
just before and after, you know, and how that affected us before, how it affected us after, and then when they came back, you know, and set in the Klan and all of those, roll it back again. You know, what do you see our people having to go through or to feel about that situation?
Well, we had to feel, we had to be despondent. We had to feel like they were just determined not to let us go forward. Letting the black men vote, they saw that that put too many blacks in office. So they said, oh, we got to do something different. So it's hard on us, especially women, but that's why we got to step out. We got to step out. I think I answered your question.
No doubt.
Well, I think I think probably if I can imagine what the people during Reconstruction must have felt like to have been finally being treated like human beings for a period of time, and then having the same old tactics employed against them that had been employed before emancipation, with the rise of the Klan and the terrorism that existed and all of that. I can imagine that they probably felt pretty, like you say, pretty despondent, but they did not lose hope, they did not lose faith. We always seem to be able to go and regather ourselves, keep the faith that we can make a difference, things will get better, and keep moving forward, because they continue to do that.
Now, tell me this. Robert Smalls, who was an uncle of Mrs. Amelia Boynton Robinson, was a slave. He was a fireman on the ship that the Southerners was running up and down the river, getting to the northern people. He had the intelligence, the guts, the gall, and audacity to decide that he was going to use their ship to free some of his friends who were slaves also. He learned the patterns, the signals, and everything for passing through that southern port. And one night went out, got on that ship, had learned all the mechanics of it, fired it up, loaded up the slaves who had enough guts to go, and we know that some of them probably was too scared to go, and I'm speculating on that one, but we got people now who's too scared to vote, so I'm just going to speculate on that one. And went through that harbor, gave all the proper signals, tooted the horn the way it was supposed to be in, traveled the speeds that was unnoticeable, and escaped himself with some of his enslaved friends, went to the north, and turned that southern ship over to the Yankees. Now, is that guts or what?
That is a lot of courage. It took a lot of courage, a lot of faith, a lot of just fortitude to be able, first of all, to even conceive of a plan that bodacious at that time, and then to actually execute it.
And that's what I want black men to do today. Now, is there any excuses for anybody to sit around in 2020 and decide that it's not going to make any difference anyhow? I'm not going to go register, it's too much problem. I don't have an ID, so, well, what the heck, I'm not going to get one. And I'm just not going to go vote because it doesn't make any difference. Is there any excuse at all for that today?
No.
There's not an excuse, but people will give you lots of explanations as to why. And I just want to encourage you, those people, if there are any of them listening to us, to challenge your explanation of why you think it's not important. Just ask yourself the question that I posed earlier. If it wasn't important, would people go to such lengths to keep it from you?
What you think?
I suggest that if you have not registered, get registered. It is very important that you register and vote. Not just register and say, I'm registered, go out and vote. Because in order for us to move forward, we need your vote.
What do you say to the person who says that it's not going to do any good anyhow because they are going to do what they want to do anyhow? What do you say to that person?
I say to that person, your vote will count. You must exercise your vote. Because, as we already stated about how they fought, how they bled, was beaten down, some prayed, they prayed. And they did a lot to get our rights to vote. So you don't need to say that my vote is not going to count. Your vote will count. Seemingly it doesn't, but it does. So let's not use that for an excuse. Let's go out and vote.
Well, I tell you what, I think voting is the only equalizing power that we have as human beings. Because you take Bloomberg, he can get up there and he can spend $20 million to try and fool people and encourage people and buy people. But every one of those people that he encouraged my vote is just equal to theirs. I don't care what he tells them. I don't care how much money he gives them. When they step up to the polls and punch, and I step up to the polls and punch, hey, those two votes weigh the same. So I'm like you guys. I want black people to understand that there is no excuse in 2020 for any black person not to get registered if you are qualified. Now, if you got some problems that keep you from being able to register and vote, well then that's on you, all right? You better go check though to make sure that what you think is a problem is still a problem. Because you can have a felony record, have done your time, paid all of your dues, and you can get your voting rights restored, you see? So don't just sit and think that the ball game is over just because you made an error. But I'm telling you now, let me say something else to you. If some of Trump's people come up to you, slip you an envelope, and it has some money in it, well now, how do you deal with that? Now, if somebody would do that to me, I would simply give them the envelope back. However, if you are needy or if you are greedy, go on and take the money. Go and have you a good time. Do something with it that's worthwhile. But when you go to the polls, where it's only between you and God and the candidates that you are looking at, then you vote your conscience. Nobody will ever know. Now I said that to drive home the point, black people, that there is just no excuse now. If you are ignorant enough in 2020 not to vote, then you have a problem. And just like Ms. Norma said, you go look in the mirror when you are asking yourself and questioning yourself about whether you ought to go vote or not. And you look at that person in that mirror and you see what that person has to say. And then you tell that person in that mirror whether they are lying or flying or just sacrificing their right as a human being. Now, closing remarks?
Closing remarks. 2020 is a critical election. The current president has already appointed over almost 200 federal judges to lifetime positions.
Absolutely.
The Supreme Court is being compromised by his appointees. We have to understand that the Supreme Court is our last line of defense in this country. If that court is compromised, it will take our children's children getting up from under the consequences of having a Supreme Court that has been compromised by someone who does not have our best interests at heart and has proven that they do not understand, nor do they care to understand, our Constitution.
My closing remarks, and they're going to be short, let's not use any excuses this year. 2020, get out and vote. Don't say for the primary, I'll wait until the election in November. Let's go out and vote in the primary. And I'm going to use the words of my father-in-law. Herbert Sears used to say, vote, vote, vote.
And vote some more.